From the heart of the Space City to the heart of Gen Z, welcome to Next Gen Conversation. Not Dad's Talk Radio. Ethan talks to you about the issues and events that matter to our generation. This is the Next Gen Report with Ethan Buchanan.
Hey, everybody. That's right. It is me. Ethan Buchanan at _Ethan Buchanan, BUCHANAN on X and Twitter. Or I should say X and TikTok. Twitter is gone. It doesn't exist. There is only X. And that's where you can find me at _Ethan Buchanan. And I am also on TikTok at _Ethan Buchanan. I post a lot of clips, show highlights there. And there's actually a lot of interesting conversation, both between people on the left and on the right, which is nice. It's not necessarily all the time civil, which is fine. Frankly, this is politics. This is social media. I'm a realist. It's not always going to be civil, but it is interesting. It is interesting. And so I'd encourage you to check that out. Read some of the comments, participate in the conversation, follow me there. It's a good time. I am so excited for this show. It's been a while since I've actually been really excited to do an episode of the show because the news has been so abysmal and so gloomy. But today we've actually got some positive topics, some interesting topics, some kind of intellectual debate that's happening on the right now, which I think is actually a good thing. There are those that will try to pose this to you as a negative. Oh, look at how divided and at each other's throats the right is. I would argue against how that's being framed. I think having these kind of back and forth ideas fight each other is a good thing. I think having this intellectual debate on the right is a good thing. And the intellectual debate in question is heritage Americans. And what that means, does that actually exist? Does it matter? I've got a lot of thoughts on that. We're going to be talking about that in the third segment. Let's start off here in the first segment by talking about AOC, because we have got some news from her. Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, who is increasingly seen as a potential Democratic candidate for president in 2028, on Wednesday night highlighted a poll showing her beating Vice President Vance in a hypothetical matchup. The poll from the Argument Verisite asked respondents what their voting preference would be if Vance and Ocasio-Cortez were the candidates in the 2028 race, and 51% backed the New York Democrat, while 49% backed the Ohio Republican. Now, AOC has kind of been doing a victory lap on this, but I want to point out to you those numbers. 51 to 49, that's what, 3 points? That's not a whole lot in a presidential race, especially not when you're 4 years out. And things are going to get only worse for AOC as we get closer to 2028, if, please Lord do it, because it'd be funny, AOC does run. Nevertheless, AOC is taking her victory lap. Here she is leaving the Capitol, and she's going, "I'll stomp J.D. Vance." Take a listen.
Reaction, or do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him. I would stomp him.
I would stomp him. I would stomp him. I mean, to AOC's credit, I think she did something that was very intellectually honest. She said these polls are, 3 years out, they are what they are, which I think is very legitimate. I mean, they polled somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 people for that poll. I went back and read the methodology. It's about 1,200 people, which isn't a lot in a country of, 300, 400 million? So, yeah, I think she's very honest when she says they are what they are. That is true. This is definitely going to change. And here's why. AOC, if she wants to win, is going to have to start right about now moving herself as far away from the Democrat Party as an institution as possible. Here's why I say that. Again, Democrat Party favorability. This is from realclearpolitics.com. This is by no means a far-right site. You can go look at these polls that they're citing and do all this independent research yourself. Here's the source. You leftists on TikTok who fuss at me when I show sources they don't like. This is Real Clear Politics. They're saying the Democrat Party unfavorability is 56%. That's horrible. 56% of people have an unfavorable view of the Democrat Party. And that's according to an average from multiple polls. Fox News, okay, that's a right-wing poll, but there's a CNN poll right there. That's not a right-wing poll. And that shows that the Democrat Party is unpopular. If you're running and you're just a member of the Democrat Party institution with that type of favorability, almost 60% unfavorable, that's a bad spot to be in a presidential election. So she's going to have to start moving away from the Democrat Party in order to actually set herself up for victory in a hypothetical presidential election. Here's the problem with that. Every time a Democrat does that, the party as an institution kills them. If you don't believe me, look at folks like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard or, any other potential candidate. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are both clear examples of this. They wanted to run for president. They recognized that the Democrat Party was not in a good place in terms of public opinion. And so they tried to move away, not a lot, not shifting to the right, not becoming Republicans, but they just tried to distance themselves a little, separate themselves out, draw some clear policy distinctions, things that were politically very smart to do. Now, what did the Democrat Party do? It killed them. It tossed them out. Now they're Republicans in the Trump administration, not by their own choice. They didn't say, oh, I'm going to turn tail and become Republicans. They had specific goals and things they wanted to do, and they realized they couldn't do that in the Democratic Party, and the Democrat Party killed them for it, politically speaking. The same thing will happen to AOC unless she just keeps running to the left, keeps embracing the institutional Democrat Party, and if she does that, she will lose. Because here's the dirty little secret about 2026. It is going to be a case study in Republicans gaining steam. I know that seems hard to believe right now because for whatever reason, we've kind of gotten this rut where, Donald Trump is failing in his first year, which is preposterous, but that's the narrative. And for some reason, Republicans are on defense about this, but that will change in 2026. And we'll dig into that in the next segment. I'm going to show you several different examples of why I think 2026 really is going to be a benchmark year for the Republicans. There's going to be a lot of key achievements, a lot of progress that was seeded this year is going to start showing its fruits in 2026, and that is going to help Republicans, and it's going to hurt Democrats. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. We'll be right back. Alrighty, so let's get to it. I want to preface this by saying I think one of Donald Trump's biggest political issues this year, it wasn't Epstein, it wasn't, the bombing of the cartel boats, it wasn't any of the things that maybe the media wants you to think it was. At the end of the day, President Trump's biggest issue in 2025 politically was the fact that the American people, by and large, are incredibly impatient. There is a significant sect of people that went to the polls in November of 2024 and thought, if I just elect Donald Trump today, and then on January 21st of 2025, or January 20th, whichever it was, he takes office, and then by February 3rd, everything will be better. The inflation will disappear, the prices will fall, and the border will just be completely closed. And now, on some of those things, he did deliver very quickly. On the border, we've had complete restoration in a matter of months. It's spectacular what he did on the border, and I wasn't even expecting it. I thought over the next 4 years, we'll be back to where we were in like 2020. But no, we're better than ever in just 1 year, which is impressive. That's insane on the border. I've never seen anything like it. That being said, I'm not particularly old, so maybe I've missed something. But even the older folks I know are like, yeah, we've never seen a border this secure. But especially economically, people wanted instant gratification. And that's not how the economy works. I've been saying this all year. The economy was broken over 4 years, okay? Systems were set in place over 4 years that progressively made the economy worse and worse and worse. We don't reverse that overnight. This is like a cruise ship, all right? You can't just hook a 180 in a cruise ship. You can't do it. It's too big. It's moving too fast. You have to slow down the boat. You have to turn it around, and then you have to get it back up to speed. That's how the U.S. economy works, all right? And so when you're trying to do a big 180 like this, it takes time. And a lot of people didn't want it to take time. They wanted the instant gratification. And so that's why you've had this negative messaging on the Trump economy for the last year. Why haven't things gotten better? But if you actually look at little details, they have. Remember at the beginning of the year when everybody was fussing about eggs? And now the egg prices are fine. Nobody's fussing about eggs anymore. When everybody was fussing about gas. And now, by and large, gas is fine. Unless you live in a Democrat state that taxes the hell out of it and has a bunch of regulations, which jacks up the price. So you see people in Democrat areas, blue states that are still complaining about gas. But if you're in a red area that actually lets the oil and gas industry do what it needs to do, people are pretty happy about gas. So if you look at those little details, things are actually improving. And here's another example of this. Inflation drops to lowest level in months, defying expectations of uptick. Prices climbed 2.7% in November compared to a year earlier. Consumer prices rose 2.7% in November, making a notable reduction from a 3% year-over-year inflation in September, the most recent month for which complete data is available. Inflation stands at its lowest level since July. The report offered the first look at price increases in nearly 2 months after the 43-day government shutdown. So the expectation was 3%, inflation. The actual number was 2.7. That is a significant improvement. Very significant. And nobody really saw that coming, except me. I predicted this. But remember, we've been hearing for months that tariffs was going to make this worse. Tariffs was going to cause inflation to skyrocket even higher. We've had tariffs for months now, and it still hasn't happened. Inflation is slowing down. Now, again, let's be realistic. Prices are still rising because that's what inflation means. But they're rising a lot slower. Remember what I said. You've got to slow down the cruise ship. Then you can turn it around. Then you can kick it back up to speed. So we're in that stage right now. And things will get better. Here is even CNN having to give Donald Trump his credit for this. Even CNN, again, no friend of the political right, saying, yeah, actually, this is way better than we thought it would be. The economy is doing great. Take a listen.
I mean, I was surprised. It was a better number than anyone was expecting. Look, inflation's been very high. It's stayed high. It has not been coming down. But, you know, people were expecting it to be above 3%. It was well below 3%. I mean, I think the president will take this as good news. The investors will think that interest rates will get cut more. So, you know, it was a positive news. There's no other way to spin it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It was positive news. There's no other way to spin it. And he's right. It is. And again, this will get better. If you actually zoom out and look at what we've seen, look at the data over the last year, it's clear that we are heading in the right direction. And a lot of those gains are going to start materializing in more, frankly, material ways next year. Once we start seeing the real benefits of all the tax legislation that was in the big, beautiful bill. Again, because all that stuff isn't instant. The thing, like the investing that we've seen in the United States, that's not instant. The tax benefits, that's not instant. That stuff will start to show up next year, and people will feel it, and that'll hurt the Democrat Party. Donald Trump said all this when he took a victory lap. I don't remember what day exactly this was. I think it was like Thursday? It's hard to remember. It's been a busy week for me. But on Thursday, this week, I won't try to remember what day it is. This week, he did this big victory lap speech in the Oval Office. And he said quite literally this: next year, you're going to start seeing the tax benefits. You're going to start seeing the investment benefits. And the economy will turn around in a big, noticeable way. Take a listen.
Next year, you will also see the results of the largest tax cuts in American history that were really accomplished through our great, big, beautiful bill, perhaps the most sweeping legislation ever passed in Congress. We wrapped 12 different bills up into one beautiful bill. That includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. Under these cuts, many families will be saving between $11,000 and $20,000 a year, and next spring is projected to be the largest tax refund season of all time. Next year,
Largest tax refund season of all time. I'm excited about that. I am. I'm looking forward to next year, and I'm thinking I might be able to be completely debt-free by the end of next year. And I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking that. That means I don't have a lot of debt, but I do have some debt, and I'm working to pay it off. And I think I'll be able to do that next year, largely because of the tax refunds. If my tax refund hits the way I think it will, I'll be able to pay off my car loan, and I'll be good. I'll be debt-free. Other Americans are thinking the same thing right now. And when that happens, when you start getting into April and June of next year, and Americans have more money in their pockets, they're saving even more on energy. They're saving even more on groceries. Or maybe they're not saving more on groceries, but they still feel that pinch in their pocket a little bit less because of big tax refunds, because they're not paying as much in income tax or what have you. All of that is going to serve the Republicans. And again, I mentioned investment. I don't think we can stress this enough. All of the investment that we've seen is going to start materializing next year. Again, Donald Trump hit this point in that speech. $18 trillion of investment into the United States. That is not a small number. That is going to have positive impacts. I don't really have time to play this video, but again, job growth, wage increases, all of this stuff is practical, all right? If you've got 18 trillion more dollars in this country, in private industry, by the way, 18 trillion in new factories, 18 trillion in expanding business operations, all of that stuff will help Americans, especially when it's Americans getting those jobs. Because again, we've deported all the illegal aliens. The job growth that we're seeing, that's not going to low-income, under-the-table foreign workers. That's going to us. It's going to American citizens. 2026 is going to be a great year for the GOP. I'm calling it right now. All right, we're going to be talking about Vivek Ramaswamy and Heritage Americans in the next segment. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back. All right. This idea of a heritage American, I think it's important that we discuss what this actually is, what this actually means. So, just so we can define our terms, a heritage American, that's kind of a colloquial term for someone whose family traces back to the actual founding of the nation. Someone like myself. I have ancestors that fought in the Revolutionary War. I've had ancestors that fought in essentially every major war the United States has fought, ever. I mean, I have documentation from the Civil War, from World War II, the American Revolution, what have you. My family has been here from a long time. I'm what you would call a heritage American. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, is not that. In the strictest legal definition, he is an American. He has American citizenship. He's an American political figure. In the strictest legal terms, he is an American, quote unquote. But is he really, right? I mean, he's not of our lineage, right? He doesn't trace back to, the Mayflower or around there like a lot of other Americans. He doesn't share a lot of our same core beliefs, particularly religiously. So what exactly is he? Is he American? Is he something different? Is he kind of American? Is he an Indian American? Is that a thing that can even happen? Can you have hyphenated Americanism? What does all this mean? This is a complicated subject, and it's not easy to fish out. Now, I would argue and this is kind of my early thoughts on this. So if this comes back in a clip and bites me in the ass in 10 years or 5 years or whenever, oh well. But here's my thoughts on this right now, and this is subject to change. I would argue that there's not a particularly strict definition of an American, but you know it when you see it. And I would also argue that Vivek Ramaswamy probably does not fit that. Because, again, you cannot have hyphenated Americanism. You either are an American and you aren't. And there are certain standards that I think you do have to meet in order to be considered an American. So that's the debate on the right now. The idea of, is someone whose family has been here since 1776, are they more American than someone whose family got here in the 1920s, or more American than someone who got here in the 80s or the 90s or whenever? And I would argue that maybe, yeah, not in a legal sense necessarily, but in just a kind of practical realist sense, yeah, I think if your great-grandparents or great-great-great-grandparents were signing the Declaration of Independence, and you can trace back and document all the blood, sweat, and tears that your ancestors put into building this country completely from scratch, you are a little bit more American than someone who just showed up here after the fact. Now, does that mean you should have less rights or you should be treated differently legally? No, it doesn't. I think you either, legally speaking, are an American or are not. But in kind of a more metaphysical sense, I think, yeah, there is a little bit of a difference there. And I think that's kind of common sense. I mean, I liken it to a great work of art or a painting. Let's say you have a painting that your grandfather painted, and he was this great renowned artist, and now it's hanging in a museum. And you know the history of that painting in detail because your grandfather painted it and he talked about it and he wrote about it, and you have stories from your parents and your grandmother who also talked about him painting it and why he painted it and what he thought all of it meant when he put together this piece of art. And now it's hanging in a museum for everyone to see. And everyone can come and visit that painting. That painting is still going to have different meaning to you. When you go to the museum to see your great-grandfather or your grandfather's masterpiece painting, that's going to have different meaning to you than someone who just walks by. Even someone who's dedicated their life to studying it. Even someone who's a noted art critic, and they go to see your grandfather's painting. It's going to mean something different to them. And what I imagine would piss you off is if that noted art critic, who doesn't know you, doesn't know your family, but this painting has had such an impact on the art world and he studied it so much, he thinks that he's got it down. And so he goes and he sits down next to you at this art museum and he starts lecturing you on what your grandfather was trying to communicate when he painted this masterpiece. And you're sitting here going, you're like, that's not what the hell he meant. That's not what he was doing. That's not what he wanted this piece of art to mean. What are you talking about? And he sits there and goes, well, no, I'm an art critic and I've studied art and I know about all these things and I bought my ticket to this museum, so I have just as much right to sit here and tell you what I think this means as you do. I mean, sure, technically, yeah, he does have a right to sit in the art museum and run his mouth. Legally speaking, yeah. But on a more practical, realistic level, that's going to piss you off. That's going to aggravate you. Because you know damn well what your grandfather meant when he painted that picture with that colors. You know what his reasoning was. And here you have this art critic running his mouth. You have a right to be offended by that. If you can trace back through 250 years what exactly your family was doing in service of this country, and you can look at the documents, the letters, the notes in the 150-year-old Bibles that they left behind, and the stories passed down from generation to generation to generation, and you know deep in your heart of hearts what they were doing and why, because you've been told these things by your family who was there, that's going to piss you off. And that's where I think I am with Vivek Ramaswamy. That's where a lot of people are on the right are with Vivek Ramaswamy. He's making a lot of enemies because he showed up a generation ago. And now he's trying to tell us what our ancestors were doing when they built this country and why they were doing it and why or what the country that our ancestors built means. America is the art piece in this analogy. All right. But let me actually play you the cut. Here he is at America Fest, and here's what he had to say about heritage Americans, and he calls the idea loony. Take a listen.
About criticizing the woke left. Now let me get to the harder part. There's a different vision of American identity that's emergent in certain corridors of the online right. And it says that your identity as an American is based on your lineage. That how long you have been in the country, your lineage and your genetics tied to the blood and soil of the country determines how American you are. It is the idea.
All right, let me stop you right there. The answer is yes. He said it out loud. Your lineage tied to the blood and soil of the country. That doesn't mean nothing. He wants to argue that it does. He wants to argue the fact that people like me, my ancestors, I have the documents to prove it, built this country quite literally from nothing, fought and died for this country, and that means nothing. I can show up, I can just walk in, and I can do it legally, I can buy the ticket, I can get the citizenship, and all of a sudden, my ideas about this country that your family built is just as legitimate as any other. I reject that whole cloth. If that makes me woke right, then F it, I'm woke right. But I mean, his proposition that your lineage being tied to the very blood and soil of the country means nothing is objectively preposterous. But let him continue.
You have a heritage American that says the truest form of an American is somebody who is a descendant of the American Revolution period or before. And I will tell you, this idea of the heritage American, we ought to have this discussion. It's becoming more popular. I think the idea of a heritage American is about as loony as anything the woke left has actually put up. There is no American who is more American than somebody else. The American quality, it's not like the left, they believe in this non-binary stuff. There's no non-binary American. It is binary. Either you're an American or you're not. And you think about it, I could prove this to you. Thank you. I'll take some applause on that. If you really believe in this idea, think about where it leads you. Leads you to believe that Donald Trump is less of an American than Joe Biden because Donald Trump's mother was an immigrant and his grandfather was an immigrant. That doesn't make any sense. Leads you to believe that somehow Bernie Sanders is more of an American than Senator Bernie Moreno from my home state, an America First patriot.
And he continues on like this, citing kind of extreme examples of the radical left and how members of the radical left, they are what you would call heritage Americans. And somehow the idea of heritage Americans discounts, you know, political differences or what have you. He takes it to extremes. And this is where I think some nuance is required because, again, legally speaking, he's right. There is no binary, or it is a binary. There is no non-binary. He makes a good point there. But again, I think this needs to be balanced with some pragmatism. You know an American when you see it. You can look at someone who's been in this country for, 250 years, their family has, and say you've rejected the ideals that this country was built on. You've rejected the country that your ancestors built. You're no longer part of this. Anyway, I'm running out of time. We're going to talk about this more in the next segment. I'm sorry. I've got too many thoughts spinning in my head. We'll be right back. All right, again, I'm mulling over this entire concept in real time. So you're getting my raw, unfiltered thoughts, and they are subject to change on this incredibly nuanced topic of what is or is not an American or heritage American, and how do we define all those complicated topics. So again, all of this is subject to change. I'm working this out. You should be working it out too. And I think it's good. I think it's good for the right to have this kind of debate, to think about these complicated topics. I will say this. Vivek Ramaswamy, I do not think is the person to have this conversation. Again, because he's, frankly, for lack of a better term, he's an anchor baby. That's not racist to say. That's a fact. He'll admit this, but not in those words. Here he is in an interview from a couple of years ago with NBC, admitting that his father is not even a citizen of the United States. And I don't believe that's changed since this interview. Vivek Ramaswamy is quite literally an anchor baby. His father is not a citizen. His mother just recently got her citizenship after he was born. He's an anchor baby. And here he is basically admitting that. Take a listen.
I believe in being consistent about my policies where...
So your father is not a citizen of the United States?
He's not.
Okay. And your mother, when did your mom take the citizenship test? Was it before or after you were born?
After I was born.
After you were born. Okay.
After years of being in this, following the legal process of becoming a naturalized citizen. She followed it through the legal process.
So there it is. His parents are legal residents, but not citizens. His father is not an American. So you can sit here and say, yeah, legally Vivek Ramaswamy is an American, but I think practically, would the founding fathers have considered him an American? There's a strong case to say that no, they wouldn't have. And now he's sitting and lecturing us on what an American is. I don't think he has the right to do that. Technically, the Constitution grants him the right to do that. He has freedom of speech. That's a good thing. He can sit and run his mouth, like the art critic in the museum. But should his opinion be taken seriously? No, it shouldn't. He has no skin in this game. His ancestors have no skin in this game. He showed up after the fact. He got to this country after my family, our families built it, and now he wants to lecture us on what we've built. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And I think everyone deep in their heart of hearts practically knows that that's not the case. But again, he is making a strong point that we do need to actually suss out what an American is. Thankfully, like I pointed out, we kind of have these hints of what our founding fathers meant when they built all of this, what they were trying to do, what they thought an American was. So here's what Jay Jones had to say. Again, he was the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He is a founding father among founding fathers. Here's what he had to say. Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, that's very important, professing this same religion, the same principles of government, very similar with their manners and customs. This country and these people seem to have been made for each other. John Jay, first Chief Justice of the USA. And he's right. Now, Vivek will tell you that anyone who just kind of politically aligns with the right and shows up the legal way and gets citizenship magically becomes an American. And I would disagree with that. I would agree that the potential to over time become American exists for everybody. But that's not an easy thing. That's not a flippant thing like Vivek would suggest. You can't just show up the legal way and vote right, vote for America First policies, and magically you're American. Jay Jones mentioned it. Religion is key here. This is a Christian nation. I've made this point 1.5 billion times. This is a Christian nation built by Christians for Christians. The founding fathers made that clear. Vivek Ramaswamy is not a Christian. He's a Hindu, which is fine. You have the right to practice any religion that you want. But if you ask the founding fathers, did you build this nation so that a bunch of Hindus can show up in 250 years and benefit from Christian society? They would look at you like you're crazy, because you are. They built this nation for their Christian descendants. And they made this very clear. Vivek Ramaswamy's idea of nationalism and what an American is more similar to the Hart-Keller Act. The Hart-Keller Act of 1965, officially the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, was a landmark U.S. law that abolished the discriminatory, quote-unquote, national origins quota system, replacing it with a new system prioritizing family reunification, that's anchor babies, skilled workers and refugees, significantly increasing immigration from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and leading to major demographic shifts in the U.S. population. Again, this is 1965. This is recent history. What an American can be and how you become an American was radically redefined in 1965. And that's what Vivek Ramaswamy thinks the Founding Fathers wanted, which is obviously not the case. If you look at quotes from J. Jones and other Founding Fathers about what they thought an American was. Vivek Ramaswamy's idea of an American is if you show up legally and vote for America First policies, you don't have to practice the same religion. You don't have to even have the same core values. Because again, religion is the most core value. Everything you do in life, you do through the lens of what your religion is. And that radically shifts things. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy would say that that doesn't matter at all. The Founding Fathers would say, yes, the hell it does. I say, yes, the hell it does. Vivek Ramaswamy disagrees. He thinks this 1965 version of how you become an American and what an American is, anyone who just shows up, that's what the Founding Fathers wanted. This is recent. 1965, in the grand scope of America, is recent. Americanism was radically redefined to the very visible detriment of the United States. Things have gotten measurably worse in the United States since we said anybody can just show up and become an American. And the Founding Fathers knew it would. That's why they said things like what J. Jones said. You have to have these shared cultures and heritage and religion that binds people together. That's why homogenous societies tend to be safer. They tend to be higher trust. Look at Japan, where everybody has a shared culture, shared heritage. Most people in Japan are Japanese. We all know what that means. Most people in America are not American. We all know what that means. All right, now we can fuss about the details and the technicalities and the legality, but at the end of the day, you know an American when you see it. And a heritage American, I do think, is more American than an anchor baby like Vivek Ramaswamy. That's not racist to say. It shouldn't be controversial. It's objectively true. His father is not an American citizen. He has no skin in this game. His ancestors did not die for this country. They showed up after mine did, which is fine. You're welcome, but you need to conform to us. You need to become an American, not an Indian American, not a Hindu American. You say Christ is Lord, or you're not an American, in my view. And that's what the Founding Fathers thought. And they say, oh, but freedom of religion. So clearly religion shouldn't matter when it comes to being an American. No, look at what they meant when they said freedom of religion. They didn't mean any Hindu person. They meant Christians. You can worship Jesus Christ in any way you please and be an American. That's why all of these states, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and others all required you to be a professing Christian to hold public office. Because the Founding Fathers knew what an American was. It's someone who died for this country, who understands that Christ is Lord, and recognizes that individual liberty inside the structures of organized religion is good for the country. And Vivek Ramaswamy wants to redefine that because it got redefined in the 60s. The answer is no. I know what an American is. You don't get to lecture me on what my ancestors built. Shut up, Vivek. I'm sick of your crap. All right, thank you for listening to the Next Gen Report. We'll be back Wednesday.